Hello, I am Miriam May. I'm the CEO of the Friends of the Arava Institute, and I'm delighted to be with you today. I'm here today with Dr. Clive Lipchin, the Director of the Center for Transboundary Water Management at the Arava Institute for Environmental Studies. The Arava Institute is a leading academic and research institute in the Middle East, located in Israel in the Southern Arava. It has academic research programs, international cooperation initiatives, environmental diplomacy initiatives, and works in the range of concerns about our climate and our world today, especially in the Middle East. Our work advances environmental cooperation in the face of political conflict and has continued to work during this time of disruption, shall we say, in Israel, moving our projects and initiatives forward straight through. We have a student body comprised of Jordanians, Palestinians, Israelis, and participants from around the world. And we were able, despite some concerns, to get everybody in for this semester, and they are studying along and are continuing with occasional breaks for demonstrations to do their work and grow as individuals and as future environmental leaders. You know, our goal is sort of to sit down someday with the environmental person, head of the environmental issues in Palestine, Jordan, and Israel, and have them all be alumni of the Institute. That's the goal. And we also have the opportunity to learn from our leading professionals like Clive and develop skills. They develop skills that will lead them to be leaders, and we are delighted to share that knowledge and leadership with you. Today, we're going to learn about decentralized wastewater management and reuse as a response to the water and sanitation crisis in the developing world, using case studies from the West Bank and Israel's Bedouin communities. I think we in the developed world often forget that 30% of the world lives off-grid, and that these are not small issues. These are, in fact, the world's issues, especially in arid and hyper-arid environments. The Center for Transboundary Water Management at the Institute provides a platform for regional water professionals and policymakers to cooperate in water conservation, desalination, wastewater treatment, and education. There's direct communication among regional water professionals in the three states of the Jordan River and Dead Sea Basin, Israel, Palestine, and Jordan. And open dialogue has made the center able to help with data sharing and establishing long-lasting relationships and trust, which are integral to those responsible for sustainable management of the region's fragile water resources. A note, please use the chat box for questions. We'll have a brief Q&A with Clive after his comments, and I'm delighted to introduce my colleague, Dr. Clive Lipchin. Clive was born in South Africa and raised in Johannesburg. He has an undergraduate degree in applied psychology and zoology with an emphasis on wildlife management. I didn't know that, Clive. See, learn something new every day. And he had immigrated to Israel in 1991 and received a master's in desert ecology from Ben-Gurion University of the Negev. In 1996, he left Israel to pursue a PhD in resource ecology management at the School of Natural Resources and Environment at the University of Michigan. And the focus of his PhD was public perception and attitudes towards water scarcity in Israel. Dr. Lipchin, Clive, has published and presented widely on the topic of transboundary water management in the Middle East. He joined the faculty of the Arava Institute in 2003. And he teaches a multidisciplinary course on water management in the Middle East. He oversees research projects and interns and students, and attends conferences that focus on transboundary water and environmental problems facing Israel, Jordan, and Palestine. He's just back from the N7 in the UAE. Maybe he can share a little bit about that, where this was one of the topics that our new friends across the Middle East are talking about. Clive, all yours.
You guys, I disappeared for a second. Okay, thanks, Miriam, for that introduction. It's always a pleasure to have the opportunity to speak about the work that we're doing here at the Institute. Thanks for everybody for taking the time out of your day to listen in. Very much appreciated. I'll speak for about 30 minutes or so, and then please feel free to provide questions and comments. I'll leave that to Sarah to facilitate. So what I'm going to be discussing with you today is some of the work that we've been developing over the last couple of years, and if anything, this work has grown and expanded over time. So let me begin. Okay, so what are we talking about? Decentralized wastewater management and reuse as a response to the water and sanitation crisis in the developing world. Case studies from Palestine and Israel's Bedouin community. So maybe this is something not of much news to anybody, but I don't think many of us intuitively think about water in this case. But water is not just water, because water, clean water, is the foundation for basically everything. We all, we always say water is life. We don't really think about it much beyond the cliched saying, but of course it is life. And in many cases in the developing world, it really is a life and or death issue. So how do we approach this situation? And how do we ensure that water is not just water in the areas of the world where access to this most basic and fundamental resource is challenging? How do we overcome these grand challenges? So we, of course, work in the Middle East, and here is a snapshot of the water scarcity reality for Israel, Palestine, and Jordan. If you focus on those numbers in red, you can see that for all three, there is a gap between supply and demand. And the question is, how do these countries, both individually, but also, of course, more importantly, cooperatively, can find ways to close these gaps? The one that you're probably most familiar with is Israel. And of course, Israel has been able to advance significantly with respect to the introduction of technologies such as desalination to close the gap, but the gap still remains. The question is, what are the options for Palestinians and Jordanians to do the same? How can they close the gaps? And you can see for both the Palestinians and Jordan that the gaps are much. Somebody was okay. So the gaps for the Palestinians and Jordan are much greater, and so the challenges for them are much greater as well. Now, to take that piece of information and to contextualize it in a transboundary situation. So this is a map of Israel and the Palestinian territories of the occupied West Bank, delineated by the green line, which is the 1949 armistice line, which is in essence the internationally recognized border between sovereign Israel and the occupied territories. And what you can see here is water resources that drain both westwards towards the Mediterranean or eastwards to the Jordan River, Dead Sea. All of those orange-shaped watersheds are all transboundary. Because the West Bank is topographically higher than Israel, any water that originates in the West Bank will ultimately drain either westwards towards the Mediterranean, crossing into Israel, or sometimes either eastwards towards the Dead Sea and Jordan River. So inherently, all water resources in our region are transboundary, and solving problems in Israel may be good for Israel, but it's not going to solve the broader regional challenges that we all face, because we all depend on the same water. The brown border that you see there delineates maybe a more important resource than surface water, and that's groundwater. So that brown line delineates the extent of the groundwater basins that we are very much dependent upon, and you can see that the groundwater is also transboundary. The entire West Bank area fits very much within the groundwater basins. So we are sharing our water, and we need to develop cooperative mechanisms to find the best way to share these scarce waters, given the challenge of that supply and demand gap that I just mentioned. Now, this shows you how all of that can be exacerbated when wastewater is not effectively treated on the Palestinian side, and how that actually causes an additional challenge to cooperative water management between Israelis and Palestinians. Because what you can see here are those sections of the watersheds that are in the West Bank, and the arrows are the directions that they enter into Israel. And we're looking at about 6 streams, a total of 8 catchments. 2 of them flow eastwards, but we're relating to the 6 that flow towards Israel. And these catchment basins inherently drain fresh water from rainfall as a flash flood event during the winter season. The reality actually is that most of these systems now are perennial systems that are not draining fresh water from the Palestinian side or from the West Bank side to the Israeli side, but are actually collecting either partially or completely untreated wastewater, and have literally been converted into wastewater conduits. So this question of wastewater and the difference in how wastewater is being treated on the Israeli versus Palestinian side, for many, many years was sort of an underlooked issue, because the focus was always on, oh, well, how do we increase freshwater supply? But what we have identified and have begun to work on at the Institute is so long as we're not able to address the wastewater issue, the long-term integrity and sustainability of our shared freshwater sources are going to be continuously compromised. Now, what you see in this slide is a summary of wastewater infrastructure in the West Bank in terms of services provided for sewer treatment for Israeli settlements in the West Bank versus the same for the Palestinian population in the West Bank. And what you can see here is a marked difference in access to infrastructure for sewer disposal in terms of treatment. If you look at the settlements, the total amount of sewage generated is roughly 21 million cubic meters of water per year, but only about 12% of that is left untreated, finding its way into the environment as a source of pollution. Most of the wastewater for the settlements are either being treated within the West Bank or is being transferred across the Green Line and is being treated in wastewater treatment facilities in Israel. But the reality for the Palestinians is markedly different. In the Palestinian side, roughly 80% of the wastewater is not being effectively treated, and that is finding its way either directly or indirectly into the environment. So this is one of the problems. The fact that there is a marked difference in the capacity for treatment means that all of that wastewater that is not being effectively treated on the Palestinian side, you can see it's an order of magnitude larger than the amount of settlement sewage, because of course the Palestinian population is larger. We're looking at a roughly 69 million cubic meters of wastewater per year being generated, and 80% of that not being effectively treated. So this is a snapshot of what is happening. I'm not going to go into, at least in my presentation, maybe in the Q&A, but not now. I'm not going to go into why this discrepancy exists. We can get to explain that maybe later on. But this is what's happening now. How do we find a way to resolve this issue, or at least reduce the impact of untreated sewage coming from the Palestinian population? Jumping back up globally, WASH, by the way, for those unfamiliar, is an acronym for Water and Sanitation and Hygiene. This is the reality globally. Only 30% of the world's sewage is treated. Most of the world's sewage is left untreated. And where does that go? It goes into our rivers, goes into our groundwater, it contaminates our beaches. It's a huge environmental and public health risk. So there's a global challenge in WASH. And we at the Institute are saying, how can we contribute to reducing this challenge in the Middle East? And if we can do it in the Middle East, can we also then duplicate our experiences into other countries? And that's why in my title, I have there lessons for the developing world. This is more or less where things stand. 46% of the world's population lacked safely managed sanitation in the year 2020, and most of these communities are what we will term off-grid. Off-grid meaning lack of access to infrastructure, sewer networks, wastewater treatment plants, and the like. So what are we promoting? We are promoting a decentralized approach to solving this issue as an alternative to trying to figure out how you would ever find a way to connect these communities to sewer grids and so forth. So decentralized wastewater treatment offers, and we are showing this in our projects, an economical and environmental solution to these communities, and thereby improving health and promoting global food security. And why am I talking about global food security? Because what we are doing at the Institute is we're linking the treatment of wastewater at the local level, recycling that water at the local level, and providing that water for irrigation for food production. So a decentralized approach links both the water security with food security. Now, you also can see there, of course, the public health hazards that untreated or unsafe sanitation results in. Unsafe sanitation is responsible for something like 775,000 deaths annually, and 5% of deaths in low-income countries. Now, these are all preventable deaths, right? These are all deaths that could be prevented if the water that they were exposed to was clean. So lack of sanitation increases the risk of risk factor of infectious disease such as cholera and diarrhea, and lack of sanitation also increases the risk of malnutrition. So of course, there's a huge benefit to trying to find a way to respond to this issue. And of course, global water shortages is very much an issue of sufficient water for food production. So global water shortages, in my mind, is a lack of water for crop irrigation, and therefore a leading cause of food insecurity. If we can treat wastewater and we can recycle that water, it's a valuable and efficient means to solving both of these crises. And as yet, treated wastewater is an underutilized resource, specifically in the developing world. So here we are with respect to the off-grid communities from a global perspective. We're looking at around 1.3 billion people that have limited access to water, sanitation, and electricity is also a challenge in the off-grid scenario. Many of these people live in rural and semi-rural communities. That's certainly the case for the Palestinians and the Jordanians and the Bedouin that we work with. And until such communities have access to efficient water, energy, and sanitation, little progress can be made to develop their economies and improve their lives. So there's a strong linkage here of water, food, energy, socioeconomic conditions, and so forth. In our case, where we are focusing on the off-grid wash, is something like this. Around 70% of the Palestinian population in the West Bank is off the grid, and you saw that in the previous slide. Approximately 30% of the Jordanian population is off the grid, and in Israel specifically, when we're talking about the Bedouin in the Negev, roughly 50% of the Bedouin population is off the grid as well. So we at the Institute are targeting these three off-grid populations in our work. And here's a snapshot of the complexity of this and also the transboundary aspect. So this is some work that we did a few years ago where we focused on one of the most important watersheds in our region, which is the Hebron-Basor watershed, where the upstream areas of the watershed are in the southern West Bank, highlighted here. Again, here you can see the green line. So this is where water is generated from rainfall, right? Again, because it's upstream. And that water will cross the green line, enter into Israel, and actually finally flow into the Mediterranean, into Gaza. So this is a transboundary resource where the Palestinians, the West Bank, are upstream from Israel, and Israel is upstream from the Palestinians in Gaza. Now, within this watershed, which is delineated by this black line, which is the hydrological boundaries, you can see a wide range of different axes and services with respect to wastewater treatment. So all the areas highlighted in green which are in Israel, are Israeli towns and cities and villages that are all connected and serviced with effective wastewater treatment at a centralized level. If you look at the area in the West Bank, all of those areas colored purple are Palestinian communities, and highlighted there is the city of Hebron, which is a large city in the West Bank of roughly 1 million people. All of that population that is colored purple are off the grid, meaning that they are not being adequately serviced. So where is that sewage going to grow? It's going to enter into the river here. This is called the Hebron River, or the Hebron Stream, and it will flow across the border into Israel. And that cross-border wastewater flow exacerbates the tensions between Israelis and Palestinians on water, because the question is, who's the polluter, who's being impacted, who should pay? But it's more complicated than that, because we have an additional complexity within Israel itself, which is the case of the Bedouin community. So here we've highlighted the Bedouin community. The areas highlighted in yellow are Bedouin towns and villages that are serviced by centralized infrastructure, such as the city of Rahat, north to Beersheba. But the areas highlighted in oranges and reds are either recognized or unrecognized Bedouin villages that are off the grid. Therefore, their sewage is also eventually getting into the watershed. So this is just a snapshot of how complicated these issues are. Within one watershed, some of the population is being serviced and some of the population is not being serviced, but we all are part of one watershed. So if not everybody is being appropriately serviced, that wastewater is going to compromise everybody living within the watershed. So that's in essence the problem that we are trying to address. And here it shows you that visually, this is exactly what happens when wastewater is left untreated. This is a picture taken within the upstream area of the Hebron River that you saw in the previous slide, not too far from the city of Hebron. And you see here highly polluted wastewater flowing in the stream. The color of the wastewater is showing you also how heavily turbid the water is from both organic and chemical pollution. And you can see that this wastewater is impacting livelihoods, because this is a picture of a Bedouin herding his goats and his sheep, and these sheep and goats are consuming the water and or the vegetation that is being being fed by this water. And of course, the question is, what are the long-term health risks from the consumption of these animals due to the fact that they are being exposed to this highly polluted wastewater? So there is a direct connection between exposure to sewage due to the lack of infrastructure and people's mobility. You just saw that quite clearly in the previous slide. And one example is diarrheal disease, which is the leading cause of hospitalization in Bedouin infants in Israel. So there is a burden on the health sector due to the lack of appropriate sanitation and hygiene management for these off-grid communities. This is what it looks like in a Bedouin town in the Negev. You can see here there's no infrastructure whatsoever. Wastewater is just left to drain into an open cesspit, as you can see here on the left. On the right, you see untreated sewage pooling around a bit of vegetation, and sewage literally flowing directly from a pipe from the building, from the home, right into in the environment. And this is why kids get diarrhea, because they're playing in this wastewater and are then being exposed to waterborne disease. This is a highlight of a project that we've begun to work on in the Bedouin community. We're working in a village called Al-Fura. It's one of the largest unrecognized Bedouin villages in the Negev, located just north of the city of Arad in the Negev. And we're working at a school, which is highlighted in this slide here, in this map. This is a school, actually it's 3 schools. You see a green and a purple and a blue. The total population of the students of these 3 schools is roughly 3,000 children. This entire school complex is completely off the grid. There's no water, there's no electricity, and there's no wastewater services. So we began to say, how could we begin to make a difference here in the Bedouin scenario working with schools. And the red dots highlight cesspits. So the only thing that is happening in these schools is the sewage is being dumped into these cesspits. And here you can see in the bottom a picture, this cement slab is basically just covering a hole in the ground. Sewage is coming from these prefab toilets here, draining into the cesspit, but you can see the cesspit is not being effectively managed, and sewage is literally draining and sitting on the surface here. Now imagine again what this means, not just for the environment in terms of the percolation of that sewage into groundwater, but the morbidity risk of the exposure of that sewage to the children that are literally on the other side of the wall here. So this is the reality that's happening all across the Bedouin towns and villages that are not being adequately serviced. So how do we service them? What do we do? Well, that's where technology that has been developed by the Institute, and one thing that Miriam didn't mention in her introduction, but we've recently launched a private company called Laguna Innovation, which is looking to commercialize off-grid wastewater treatment technology that has been developed through research and development from the Arava Institute. So we're taking a page from universities that commercialize technology that is being done under research in laboratories on the field. We too at the Institute are doing the same because we strongly believe that one way to solve this problem is also through involvement of the private sector. So what we've developed here at Laguna Innovation is a technology that we believe and have demonstrated can effectively address the problem that I just mentioned through a decentralized off-the-grid way by providing technology that is energy self-sufficient, no need to connect to the grid. You can see there's solar panels. In terms of wastewater treatment, it's virtually sludge-free. There's hardly any waste being produced. A part of our design, which has been patented in the United States, relates to the sludge-free component. We use a biological filter to treat the wastewater, which means this can be looked at as a living system. There is no chemical or other kinds of elements. There's no chemical inputs that have to be placed or introduced. It's purely through the interaction of algae and other bacteria that consume the biological and organic and chemical matter. Systems can be scaled per the client's needs in terms of how much wastewater needs to be treated. And very importantly, and also quite exciting from my perspective, is we are engaging with the opportunities that technology is providing to us for remote monitoring and operation, which means that no or minimal personnel is needed. These systems are fully automated, and you could literally run and control this entire technology through your smartphone. So the intersection of hardware technology and software technology in the water sector is actually becoming a very exciting place to be. And if I can say it, the Institute is right there. We're in it. We're dealing with it. We're being innovative. We're being creative. Systems are portable. Of course, we're dealing with off-grid communities. So many of them are remote in difficult to locate geographies. So we bring the system in on a truck like this. We place it on site, and it's literally plug and play and ready to go within a couple of hours. One of our most exciting projects is with our Palestinian partners. We have a very, very good project in a Palestinian town of 15,000 people located just north of Nablus, where the entire town, 15,000 people, is off the grid. And we have engaged with the mayor and the city officials, and we have installed also at a school, like what I just mentioned in the Bedouin, but this time a much larger system, as you see in the picture. This is a 25 cubic meter per day system. It's servicing 300 students as well as additional community members nearby. What we are doing with this project and with this facility is the treated wastewater is being used to irrigate up to 300 olive trees. So in this project, we're showing very much that water-food nexus, that not only are we treating the wastewater, which has the public health and environmental benefit, but there's also a clear economic benefit to helping farmers be more productive, because now we are providing them a good quality and reliable source of water for irrigation. Again, you can see here, we come in, we're portable, we bring it in on a truck. Installation is literally a matter of a couple of hours, and the system is up and running. This, I think, is very important, because everything we're doing is building climate resilience and sustainable development for these off-grid communities. So in the case of our project in the West Bank, our project allows for adaptation to increasing drought conditions. We are mitigating pollution and extraction of groundwater. We estimate that we can support up to 80,000 to 100,000 families throughout the West Bank with our technology that relies on olives as a primary or secondary source of income. And the treated wastewater, the effluent, is a reliable source of nutrient-rich water. So there are many aspects here of benefit that go way beyond just treating wastewater, or go way beyond just thinking about this as a purely environmental issue. Very important, sustainability from an economic perspective. We estimate that olive oil yields from our intervention will improve by around 50%, and that will provide an additional revenue to each farm per year of over $5,000. Keep in mind what that means. The average income of a Palestinian family in the West Bank is $400 a month. So by providing this additional revenue through effective irrigation with treated wastewater, can have huge benefits to the Palestinians. Now, scaling that up to the transboundary perspective, any improvement of wastewater treatment on the Palestinian side means less wastewater entering the environment, which means less wastewater crossing the border and mitigating an Israeli-Palestinian conflict. So where we also engage at the Arava Institute on our Track 2 diplomacy side is using these projects to promote better collaboration between Israelis and Palestinians, because both Israelis and Palestinians understand the value of the reuse of wastewater for irrigation as a means to both build up socioeconomic, the socioeconomic level of the Palestinian population, and also, of course, improve overall wastewater management for the region. Water sampling is an essential aspect of this work, and here we engage students. So here's an example of some of Arava Institute students in the field, sampling the wastewater, making sure that the water quality is correct and is acceptable for irrigation purposes. We've done some interesting research that's been published in the scientific literature from some of the work of students, where we've been looking for what is called contaminants of emergent concern. Contaminants of emergent concern are those elements such as antibiotics and herbicides, which could still remain as residue in wastewater that is being used for irrigation. Our study was the first study in the scientific literature that looked at this in terms of off-grid systems. And I'll end off on this slide, which is to try to summarize some of the work that we are doing, whether it be for the Palestinians, the Jordanians, for the Bedouin, and for the Africans, for the Indians, for the Chinese, and in the case of the United States, for the Native American communities and others. There are huge areas within the United States that are off-grid. There's great potential for our work also in the United States, and not just for the Native Americans. There are numerous cases of urban areas where centralized wastewater infrastructure is failing, and a decentralized solution could really help there. So in order to get to both sustainability and scalability, these are some of the elements that are essential, and this goes beyond the technology. You need the community to be a partner. You do not want to look at the community as a beneficiary. They are your partner, and they need to be fully part of the process. You must engage with government, both at local and national level, especially in the case of Israel, because the Ministry of Health is the ministry that regulates wastewater. So we are very much in touch with the health ministry with respect to our work in the Bedouin sector. You need to create local institutions to manage these systems. So we call these few utilities, few meaning food, energy, water utilities. Capacity is essential in terms of operation and maintenance, monitoring, and extension services. And like I said, we are building capacity through remote monitoring and operation. Local business initiatives are probably one of the most important things. And you saw there that if we are able to show long-term economic benefit by generating an economic benefit through an income surplus, what do you do with that additional money? How do you use it to build a business around these? For example, should I be selling the wastewater? Who's paying for it? And so on and so forth. And finally, very importantly for us, we need to go beyond aid. What does that mean? You need to go beyond the development organizations, the donors, right? Donors are essential to get your foot in the door. They're essential to get you started, but the donor is not going to stay around for 10 years. Right? The donor might be with you if you're lucky for 3 years. What do you do after the donor exits? You have to build long-term sustainability. You have to have this thing stand on its own legs, and it can only stand on its own legs if it is a commercially driven enterprise. So I'll stop at this point. Thank you for your attention. Hopefully I wasn't too long, and happy to engage in Q&A. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Clive. And I think there are some questions, and I'm going to start us off with, so there's two questions that I know we've dealt with, and you spoke about a little bit, is that in Israel, people are very used to a water reuse. It is a known thing. It's used in agriculture widely and widely accepted. Do you find, as you bring this technology and concept to other communities, that there is resistance to that? And how does the Institute's relationships help you kind of break through this cultural divide on the understanding that reused wastewater is a valued and valuable?
Right. I think that's the key. I mean, it relates to what I said earlier. You need the community to buy into what you're doing. And I think, again, you know, even in the developed world, wastewater is considered to be something simply to be disposed of, right? It's polluted, it's smelly, it's gross. Let's just treat it so that it meets minimum environmental standards and just get rid of it, right? What we're saying is it's a paradigm shift. Wastewater, if it can be treated, should not be just disposed of. Don't just put it back into the sea or into the river, especially in arid regions like ours. Reuse it for agriculture. Now, Israel has done that exceedingly well, as I think many of you know, but it's done it at a very centralized level with very, very expensive and very complicated technologies. But it's done it, and it's done it better than anybody else. What we're saying is, if we can do it at that level, how do we do it scaling it down? Not scaling it up, scaling it down. And that's where our work comes in. And I'll say that when I've spoken to the Palestinian farmers that we work with, I haven't seen any pushback from reuse. They understand that, for example, one of my farmers said to me, he says, look, I'm only dependent on rainfall. That's it. That's all I have. So I have no control over yields. One year I might get 60 kilograms of olives, but the next year I might get 10. But my expenses are always the same, right? It's sort of like, you know, if you're a consultant, you got the project, you get money, you don't have the project, you don't have money, but your expenses stay the same. So what does reused wastewater give that farmer? It gives that farmer reliability, gives that farmer stability, it gives that farmer the ability to say, I can plan ahead. I might not get 60 kilos, maybe I get 40, but I get 40 consistently every single year, whether it rains or it doesn't rain. So you're building resilience, both economically and in terms of also against climate change. And the farmers understand that, they appreciate that. And so the more that we do this work, the more that you see the socioeconomic benefits, the more the uptake will be. And I think we're already beginning to see that happening. For example, in Al-Sira, where we're working, as soon as we started our project, the neighboring farmer said, I want to benefit too. I want in as well. So that's the way the things are happening.
One of the other things that you talked about is Laguna Tech, and it's sort of transportability, that you could just sort of put it down somewhere. And I want to say that though these people are off grid, you talked about how telephones are a key part of the technology. Everyone has a phone. You may live off grid, but you've got a phone.
And that's a huge opportunity, because today phones are no longer phones. Phones are computers. They're actually more powerful than computers. So that's exactly it, integrating technology that everybody has already. And so the remote operating and maintenance of our systems is exactly, is piggybacking on technology that everybody has. And that's hugely empowering for everybody. And it's a huge opportunity to roll this out and to scale this up and out.
David Trapp asked a question about the sort of maintenance of all this work. How do you keep the systems going in terms of frequency, technical training, parts? Now, I think that was about the wastewater. I don't know if it was about Laguna, but do you want to—
Look, it goes back to the point that I said, I summarized in my last slide. You've got to build institutions for localized R&D. You need an entity that will take ownership of the technology. And that's not me. And it's not Laguna, right? We want to also exit. We want to go in, we want to demonstrate, we want to get the systems up and running, but then you want to hand over the keys to a local authority that has the ability to do everything that is required. Of course, you've got to make sure that they have that ability. So a big part of our work is not just to introduce the technology. That's not enough. You've got to do training. You've got to do capacity building. You've got to do education. And that takes time. It takes time. You've got to have a long-term commitment. So all of that has to happen. You've got to look at this in a very comprehensive way. The technology is just one piece of making this thing work.
Someone asked a question about taking Laguna overseas, a scale, I guess that's a scalability or where we are on the trajectory, maybe not there yet, but where do you—
Well, I can, if you allow me, I can't say this definitively, but Laguna is in negotiations with a number of potential clients in South Africa, in Brazil. We've had some calls in China, in India, even in the United States. So we definitely are looking to go international, absolutely. Otherwise, the company won't survive. Everybody understands that. We have to have an international market. And as I said also, no, I didn't say this, so I will say it. We will start soon a project in Jordan. We're working with partners in southern Jordan where we have an agreement to bring in at least 3 Laguna systems. And what's interesting in Jordan, which I'm very excited about, because again, it relates to the diplomacy aspect of our work. The Jordanian government has a decentralized wastewater law. In other words, there is a legal structure to actually encourage decentralization in the wastewater sector, because the Jordanian government understands that they'll never be able to provide centralized service to everybody in the country. So there's a legal mechanism, which is something that we want to support. We want to strengthen the government's policy and say, you guys have put a policy on the books. Here's a project where you can actually implement that policy and make sure it actually is meeting whatever your regulations are. We want to know what those are, and we want to make sure we're meeting your regulations. So I'm very excited about the Jordanian project because we will be able to support the government's policy. And of course, if the government is happy with us, well, then we have 3 projects now. We hope to have 10, 50, 100 moving on into throughout the Kingdom of Jordan.
And I'd like to say that that is also based on the sort of ongoing relationship that the institutes had in Jordan and the West Bank, where we have trust. And when the Israeli government might seem to some not to have good relations with its neighbors, the Arava Institute is able to sustain those relationships because of 25 years of trust and experience, and our former students being now engaged in the work in Jordan. Mike Roth asked a question about whether this would be something that could work on the Kidron River, or is it too big a scale and something different would be needed?
Well, the Kidron River, certainly, we could definitely work in areas within the Kidron. So there are a number of Palestinian communities that we could service that would then literally remove that pollution entering the Kidron. There's no reason why. Absolutely, we have connections there too. I know a number of people. Firstly, I know Mike. So hi, Mike. But I know a lot of people working in the Kidron Valley. One of our faculty members, Jawad. Jawad is an expert in the Kidron. One of our goals is to service an entire community. So I didn't mention this, but Laguna has developed 3 commercial sizes of systems, 25 cubic meters a day, 50 and 100. So we could bring in a 25 cubic meter per day system. We estimate can service between 300 to 400 people. So if it's a village of 1,000, between 1,000 to 2,000, that would be a 50 or a 100 capacity system. We could place that system. All that we would need is the creation of a mini grid within the village to collect the sewage from all of the houses, bring it to a centralized point, and from there we can pump the sewage. We're actually now exploring doing exactly that for the Bedouin because those are more or less the numbers of Bedouin communities.
The question was raised about supporting the work of Laguna at this point, which it has not moved into the investment arena yet. But yes, you can talk to us at Friends about making gifts that would support the early stage work of Laguna, and also kind of being there and ready for when Laguna is ready for investors directly. So we're most happy to talk to you about that. Okay, Mike, you're going too deep for us here in this conversation. Feel free to take those offline with. You have a relationship with Clive. I'll let you do those. Is there a website for Laguna?
Yeah, I'll put I'll put now the websites in the chat. You all are happy to take a look and give comments and feedback as we grow the company. Let me just, did I spell it right?
Right. Right now, we have the capacity to take donations that help support these ongoing sort of test opportunities that Laguna is doing. I think soon there will be a time where people can start thinking about other ways to invest, but we're not quite there yet. But we would be happy to know of your interest. And I'm sure Clive particularly would be happy to know. So I appreciate that. I think we're good. Sonia, did we answer your question? I think we did. And Clive has shared the link to Laguna Innovation. That's great. I think that's, oh, there's a new question. Thank you. Oh, it's a thank you. If you want to, here's a question, Clive. Are there outcomes from these wastewater systems other than just the water itself? Is there a secondary product that comes out of it, whether that could be used for fertilizer or other purposes? Or is it just that then needs to be shipped out and taken care of?
Right. Well, actually, what we are looking at, and we're going to begin to test this soon, is we do estimate that there's some biogas that we could maybe collect from the system, because again, it's a biological breakdown of sewage, and therefore you generate biogas as a byproduct, and of course biogas can be converted into energy. So we're going to do some research on that and see, are we generating enough biogas to actually make it worthwhile sort of siphoning that off and then offering that as an additional service or additional product to users.
David Chaikin.
But that's still very early stage. We're not quite there yet. That's very early stage.
David Chaikin asked the question about costs and how long it takes for the system to pay for itself, shall we say. I presume that varies against where the system is.
Well, I'll say this. I'm not gonna go into that. I don't think we're quite ready for that. But what I will say is this. I mean, we have a business model, but I don't think this is the right forum. But what I will say is this. What Laguna and of course the Arava Institute, right? They really are two very integrated entities. If Laguna benefits, Arava benefits, and vice versa, of course. What Laguna wants to do is to develop local manufacture. I think that's important because that's an added benefit of a company. We want to create jobs in these low-income places. And we're actually now in the discussions in South Africa for local manufacture for the South African and maybe the African market. We very much hope that our project in Jordan will lead us to considering local manufacturing in Jordan, which of course gets us from Jordan to the rest of the Gulf and eastwards. And also for the Palestinians. We have another project that deals with desalinations and not wastewater. And in that, we work with a local Palestinian manufacturer that is building for us a desalination unit. So the capacity in Palestine to build these things absolutely exists. And for us, it's all about building and encouraging the local market. So once we develop local manufacturing, obviously then price points will differ depending on who's manufacturing, what is the ability for that market in terms of where's the cost point, and so on and so forth. So at the moment, of course, we're building systems per order and need in Israel, but our long-term vision as a company is that we'll have local manufacturing markets that we have a clear ability to sell our units in.
Well, I think we've answered a bunch of questions and we've left a lot of questions for the future. There will be a moment for our sort of real launch of Laguna. In the meantime, you've gotten a real insight into all the things, not all the things, but many of the things that Clive is working on water, and even a little bit of a teaser for some of the things that Jawad is working on as well. And, a real understanding, I think, that the Arava Institute's relationships that go back for 25 years in Jordan, in Palestine, in the Bedouin communities across Israel, and in Israel itself, have allowed us and make us capable of doing these things.
Miriam, can I just, if you don't mind, before we run out of time, there's another question from Stuart, and I do want to relate to it. Stuart asks about, can we talk more about Track 2 water projects in Gaza? So I want to relate to that briefly because the Institute is very heavily involved and engaged through its Track 2 work and with its Palestinian partners in Gaza on water, wastewater, and energy. So we've done a lot of excellent work in Gaza on bringing solar energy into Gaza. We've done a lot of work by introducing WaterGen, which is another Israeli company. This is an atmospheric water development company that produces drinking water from the air. And in partnership with WaterGen, we've introduced, if I'm not mistaken, at least 5 WaterGen units into Gaza.
7
WaterGen units into Gaza. And the next phase for us, the way we got WaterGen into Gaza, now we want to see how to get Laguna into Gaza as well. So the next stage of our engagement with Gaza, again, with our Palestinian partners, and all our partners in our work in Gaza is to also see how we can get Laguna in there as well. And in that way, we are providing comprehensive water, energy, and wastewater solutions to the Gazan population.
I just want to say about Gaza, once again, it was exactly where I was going with my comments about our relationships, including within Israel, because you do not get Israeli technology or Israeli goods into Gaza without the permission and cooperation of both the IDF and the civil authority. So our relationships in Israel, as well as our relationships with Palestinians, are essential to making all these things and all these opportunities work, and to be able to help the people who are living in Gaza and do not have access to clean water. The water crisis in Gaza is severe, both on the wastewater side and on the clean drinking water side. That's right. Mm-hmm. And it's very, very humid there because it's right on the coast. And that's what makes the WaterGen technology particularly apt for this. And we have to thank our donors who have really provided the opportunity for us to get these 7 systems in and paid for them and paid for our ability to make it work. And even when they had to be very patient with waiting for the civil authority or the IDF.
And I want to add one other point, which brings in again the diplomatic aspects of our work, and why the Israeli government and everybody understands the value of what we're doing. In the case of wastewater that is untreated and is being discharged into the Mediterranean from Gaza flows northwards into Israel. And that's a great concern for Israel, because what happens is that wastewater then compromises the ability of Israel to desalinate at Ashkelon. Ashkelon is one of our largest one of our largest seawater desalination plants. So what does this mean, right? This is exactly where the Institute comes in, because solving the wastewater problem in Gaza is not just good for Gazans. If we solve the wastewater solution in Gaza, we're actually supporting and strengthening Israel's ability for its own water security, so that the wastewater doesn't enter into and cause a problem with desalination on the Mediterranean coast. So all of this is linked one with the other. And at the end of the day, everybody more or less understands this. It doesn't really matter who's in power. These essential resource elements, it's clear everybody needs to have safe water, good access to energy, and nobody should be getting sick from untreated wastewater. So those are benefits nobody can argue. It doesn't matter where you are on the political spectrum. And we have the ability and the credibility and are moving forward and making a real impact. We're moving the needle, let's put it that way.
And wastewater into the ocean does nobody no good, whether it does the ocean, the Israelis, the Palestinians, everyone feels that effect. And wastewater in Gaza has closed the beaches in Ashkelon. So we are in this together, as we like to say at the Arava Institute. Nature knows no borders. Thank you, Clive, for your thoughtful and regional work. If we have other questions, thank you, alumni. I see a few of you on here, Vivian, Andreas. I'm sure there are others. And for the work you're still doing in the field. And we're glad you continue to be interested and engaged. Thank you, Clive, for your time and for all the work you're doing and for what we have been able to learn from you today. If you have other questions, feel free to be in touch with us, and feel free to reach out. And Sarah will also be sending you some information and a recording so that you feel have access to all this. Thank you all very much. Right on time.
Thank you all. Thank you very much. Thank you.